As we work through laying the foundation for our narrative so we can begin writing, there are a couple of points to work through. You'll already have an idea of what you want to write about, the proposed content of your novel. Before we start putting words on the page, we need to consider the approach we're going to take towards this piece of writing. What is your story going to be about? Is it a thriller novel? Is it a romance, perhaps a combination of thriller, romance and science fiction? Or is it a work that doesn't fit the marketing world's genres? Perhaps it's a memoir. Perhaps it's non-fiction. Perhaps an idea for a literary novel exploring the innermost depths of the human experience. The essential thing is, it's uniquely your story. Is this story bursting to get out of you? First, a decision must be made about how you are going to tell the story. This course will provide a plan and a framework to keep the words flowing and achieving set goals. While I earned a good living as a journalist and writer for more than 30 years, the one piece of writing I most wanted to complete was a novel. Over the decades it had different names, different characters, different approaches, but I could not pull off that first draft. I had so much to say, rich characters in a magnificent landscape, heartbreaking social issues. This was the novel that ended up being Insurrection. Much of what I wrote ended up on the cutting room floor, entire chapters. The cold realization is that fiction writing today is about entertainment. I handled my characters, landscape and social issues, but they had to fit in to an entertaining narrative. And that's not so bad. I raised my struggle with my first novel to show my mistakes. First, not completing a first draft in a reasonable set time, and then understanding the necessity of investing some time in considering an approach. And that is the stage that we're at now. Finding the best approach to a story is never easy. In filmmaking parlance, the approach is how the story will be told and unfold in words and vision, and it's called the treatment. Scriptwriters can spend weeks on developing a treatment, often after the first drafts of the script are completed. In writing, we need to consider our approach before we start. It can save a lot of time in the long run. Some writers spend a long time plotting an outline, going into great detail, and working out plot lines, inciting incidents, turning points, character arcs, subplots woven through the general narrative, and so forth. Writers such as Jo Nesbø, or pronounced in his homeland of Norway as Jo Nesbø, with apologies for my pronunciation. Anyway, Jo is a noted Norwegian writer of crime and standalone fiction, and he writes very detailed outlines of between 50,000 and 100,000 words. Building a detailed plot is one approach to consider for your work, and is popular with many writers. Other authors, such as Stephen King, write from the seat of their pants, letting the story unfold in the hands, actions and reactions of his characters. In his book On Writing, he describes starting a novel as a sculptor might approach a great slab of stone. From an early idea, he starts chiseling away the stone to see what emerges, what remains. Slowly but surely, the narrative, like the sculptor's sculpture, is left behind as the stone is chiseled away. These two differing styles of approach by various authors are often termed plotters and pantsers. So what is the best way? A plotting approach or writing from the seat of your pants? The choice is entirely up to you. The challenge of this course is to get the first draft down in a set time of 10 weeks. I suggest we take a flexible approach that I have used successfully. If you want to develop a more detailed outline, by all means do so. You may already have an outline written. Certainly you will have notes and bits and pieces and ideas in notebooks on scraps of paper in your head. You may have nothing written down, but certainly have ideas, otherwise you wouldn't be travelling this road with me now. There is only one rule, and that is there is no wrong way. Time for some nuts and bolts suggestions. Start with a blank sheet of paper or its digital equivalent, spread horizontally. Collect all your notes and snippets that you have collected over time. Draw a line across the page. This signifies the length of your story. Draw a short vertical line at each end of the horizontal line. Now draw another line dead centre on the horizontal line, dividing the length in halves, and 2 more vertical lines, each at the centre point of each half. The 4 sections formed by the vertical lines are the roughed out structure of your novel. You may recognise that I am broadly adhering to the rule of 8s of narrative structure. Much more about structure later in the course. And now we'll write some brief notes at each of the vertical lines. In the first, in a few words, describe how your story will start. This will eventually, in your writing, expand into the first sentence, the first paragraph, the first page, the first chapter. The normal reasoning of the first chapter is to claim the reader's attention and induce them to read on. The second vertical stroke on the storyline is approximately 25% through the narrative, possibly around the 12 to 15,000 word mark. This will be the first major plot turn. Previous to this, through the first section, we have met the protagonist and associated characters going about normal, everyday life. This first point on the rough plan is often called the inciting incident. This action, whatever it may be, will take the protagonist from normal, everyday life and force him or her into abnormal actions, reacting to some challenge. To your reader, this first plot twist will come as a surprise and will drive the narrative forward and forces the protagonist into the body of the story and out of her or his comfort zone. The vertical line halfway along your storyline is called, not surprisingly, the halfway point. This will probably be 30,000 to 40,000 words into the narrative. Here, another major twist comes into the story. Perhaps it is a crossroad of life, and your protagonist must decide to go one way or the other. This action or decision pushes the protagonist and associated characters along through the ever-increasing stakes of the second half of the novel. Write a brief summation of the halfway plot turn on the diagram. The fourth short vertical line, somewhere near the 3/4 mark and in the vicinity of 45,000 to 60,000 words, is a point of heartbreak and devastation. This is the protagonist's low point. The protagonist will be on the verge of giving up. Everything that can possibly go wrong has gone wrong. His or her attempt to be the hero in the narrative is crushed. From this low point, the protagonist has to look forward and reclaim the future. Make brief notes as the narrative builds to speed towards the conclusion of the story. And that is the final vertical line on the right-hand side of the diagram. This denotes the conclusion. The denouement. All loose ends are tied, questions answered, it's all over. You have found a way to finish your story, and we will deal with that in detail further into the course. As with the other turning points, make brief notes. As an aside, writing the conclusion first and having it as a beacon in the distance is a valid approach to the novel, and many writers take this way. We now have a plan, as brief as it may be, on a piece of paper. Now you may well react to what seems to be a formulaic approach to the structure of this draft. I know I was always going to break all the rules of genre. Hard experience tells to start a first draft along accepted structural lines and develop the story in whatever direction you wish later. Even using an accepted structure, there is no limit to the creativity that can be used in your writing. Now this mud map is more than enough planning to allow you to start writing the first draft of your novel. You have the interest building or high voltage turning points, you have ideas of final resolution and conclusion. If you have scenes or snippets already written, mark where they may fit on your storyline. Now you have a general plan to follow. Look at your notes, look at your mud map and write a brief summary, no more than 60 to 100 words, to answer the question when someone asks, "What is your book all about?" With that one-page mud map you're ready to go. Well, almost. I believe it is important to maintain flexibility and know that your story will take on its own life. Your characters will take on their own lives. This is where the real magic happens. Be accepting if they take you away from that original plan. That is why we have kept it brief and to the point. It's just a mud map, and never be afraid to change your plan at any time. The next decision is to find your voice. How are you going to tell your story? Present or past tense, third person or first person? So let's go to the next video and find a voice.